No, generally, it will be specific security only. Tenant level setups will be specific to any configuration only. So if you're saying SAML setup, right? SAML setup you want to know, right? That is a tenant level setup actually. Okay. Because that controls whole tenant to get into the login actually. So that is a tenant level setup. But this one is security accessing tenant, managing a security group is not a tenant level setup. It's a kind of access issue actually. Now let's say if Jacqueline is not able to create a security group, this is not a tenant level setup.
Okay. So I would like to know these kind of issues. Maybe small things sometimes if we go work as somewhere else, people like,
Yeah.
yeah, you don't
Yeah.
know what we are doing here.
Yeah.
Yeah, it should not be
Basically,
blank. Yeah.
yeah. So basically, whatever you do in Workday, you perform in
Mm-hmm.
Workday, you see in Workday is completely based on your security. Okay. So you might be not having access to create a security group, but your same team member who is with the same role with you might have access to create security group. So that depends upon the security that you have. Okay. Create security group access will come with security administrator and also security configurator roles actually. Okay. Security administrator is user-based security group. Okay. Security configurator can be role-based and also can be user-based also. Some organization just grant all the permissions to security configurator and assign to those folks who can actually perform some security activities. But security administrator is a super user of security, can perform any security activity. So if you're not able to perform any security related thing, either create a user, either create a security group, it's not something at tenant level, it's something at security.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, I got
How
it.
do you know
So
that
let's
kind of
say,
issues?
mm,
So how do
yeah,
you
please
know
go ahead.
how do you know whether that is a security issue or that is a tenant level issue? Is there is a simple task for you. Okay. Securable item. Okay, there is a task called view security for securable item, which will allow you to
Mm-hmm.
view security for securable item. Okay. This is the task that will allow you to identify whichever task that you're not able to perform, whether it is a security issue, whether it is any other issue. This should be able to give you a kind of quick solution for you. Okay. So let's say you're not able to create a security group now, right?
Yes.
Actually, handle this task here, create security group. Okay. Create security group. Go here and you should be getting what all the security group that should be assigned for this task. Okay. So create security group is a task that is under this functional area. Okay. And if you go to the security, you should be having any of this security group. Okay. Any of this security should be assigned to you. Okay. That will give you permissions to create security group actually. Okay. So if anyone is not assigned to you, you'll not be getting access to create a security group. That is first thing that you need to know. Okay.
Okay. Well, let's say right now Jacqueline doesn't have anything, right? Can we able to add?
Yeah. We'll not have that provision in this tenant. That's what I told you. We don't have a control
Sure,
to
sure.
assign security. If it is a role-based security, we can assign. Okay. If it is user-based security, we cannot assign actually. If I go to Jacqueline's profile,
Mm-hmm.
so if I go to Jacqueline's profile now, I can see what all the security that she has, but I cannot assign her security because that is a limitation that has been granted in this tenant actually.
Okay.
If I go to her profile, something on the security side, if I go, you can see security profile, no? So you have a lot of options here. Assign roles and remove. Okay. So role-based security can be handled actually. Okay. And assign user-based security. This is where you can assign security administrator to this. If I click on this, it will not allow me. It will go off. It will come and go actually.
Yeah, got it. Still we saw it. We saw
Yeah.
it. Okay.
It will not allow me to assign any user-based security. Okay. So that control we don't have so far. But in real session, we will not be seeing this actually. It should be, if you are a security administrator, you should be able to see everything related to security.
So this create security groups comes under where exactly the user like this is a task, right? The create security group.
Create security group is a task,
The
yes. Yeah.
So, but we are not able to add to Jacqueline, right?
We are not able to add because Jacqueline is not a
Uh,
security administrator. Okay. She's not able to add anything
okay.
security to herself.
Okay.
But Logan, if Logan is a kind of a security administrator, Logan should have access to assign security to Jacqueline. But since we have a limitation in this tenant, we cannot assign any security to the user in this
Mhm.
tenant actually. Okay. Only user-based security group. But other security group we can create and
Okay.
use that one also. Only user-based security
Okay.
have some limitation. I told you the reason also, no? The
Yeah,
reason
yeah, yeah. Right, right, right. Yeah.
we can create our own logins. Outside of them,
Yeah,
we
yeah.
can create our own login and access this tenant. So to avoid that kind
Mm.
of things, they've actually restricted this to create a user-based security group and assign that user-based security group to the user.
Okay, got it, got it. Yeah, got it. Yeah, understood. Okay.
Okay. Now the role-based security group, which is a very powerful and important security group in whole workday security.
Mm.
So we need to know. I think we learned the process also. Okay, let me get into the. So these are all the steps that we have. Okay, we need to create a role
Mm.
first and enable that role to organizations, and then create a role-based security group and assign that role whatever we have created to the role-based security group. And then when you actually
Mm.
create a role-based security, we have an option to see how you wanted to have inheritance to be flown actually. With the role that you're creating,
Mm.
how do you want this inheritance to happen, whether to all the managers or to all the subordinate organizations is what you need to specify. You'll be selecting those options. So once you create this and have roles assigned and assign some
Mm.
kind of inheritance permissions, then submit this. Once you have Once you have submitted this, your role-based security will get created. And then you can assign the domains and BPN security permissions to that, activate that security. Then you should be getting right access for that role. Then
Mm.
we can test that user by assigning to few people actually. That's what we are going to do today. So there is a task called maintain assignable roles actually. There is a task called maintain assignable role. Maintain assignable role. So now Jacqueline was not able to create a security group, but she is able to
Mm.
manage the roles actually. So we need to know the difference because ideally security administrator will have both access. Now since Jacqueline is not able to create a security group, but she is able to assign roles in the sense there is a
Mm.
different security between these two tasks. To understand what is the security for these two, you can actually use the same task that is review security for securable
Mm.
item and have a task maintain assignable roles different functional area. And
Mm.
you can see here, this has security administrator. And previously, whatever
Mm.
the what is it? Create security group. Okay, create security
Yeah.
group does not have a security administrator, which means that Jacqueline is part of security administrator because she is able to create roles. Okay, but
Mm.
there is invalid security. To this security administrator, there is no access being provided to create a security group. Okay,
Oh,
so that could be the issue because Jacqueline is able to create a role. Okay, which means that
okay.
she is part of this security. Okay, she is part of security administrative security. Okay, you can know who are all assigned with this users also. If you go to the user-based security group, you can know
Mm-hmm.
who are all part of this security group also. You can see if Jacqueline is part of whatever I was saying, right? That should be the correct one. Okay,
Yeah.
you can see if you go
Wonderful.
to some members. If you go to members, you should be able to see to all this security to whom the security group is administered is assigned actually. If you're seeing Jacqueline as
Remember.
part of the security, So Jacqueline is there here. Okay. So which means that
Okay.
she is part of security administrator security group. Okay. Ideally, she should have access to create security group. But what should have happened is they would have restricted this
Mm-hmm.
create security group permissions to security administrator. Instead of giving that permissions to security group, security administrator, they would have removed those permissions to security administrator. That's the reason, even though that Jacqueline is a security administrator, she's not able to create a security group, which is not usual thing that you generally see. Generally, security
Mm.
administrator should have all the access. All the access related to the security should have. But even though Jacqueline is a
Mm-hmm.
security administrator, she's not having access to create a security group means people have removed that unknowingly actually.
So one question, like
Hmm.
every week, every Saturday, that refresh will happen at Friday night.
Yeah, yeah.
Will it come next week or like it won't come? This it always stays with this tenant. So this tenant also refresh, right? Every week.
No, this tenant will not refresh actually. This will go for this will be down during the maintenance window, but this will not get refreshed actually. This is not a
Okay, it
live
won't refresh.
tenant, no. When you get your system get refreshed, when you have a live environment, let's say sandbox is there. Okay, sandbox will go for maintenance window for every Saturday. It will get refreshed, and all the production data will get copied to sandbox. Right? That's the general.
Mm-hmm.
But this
Mm.
tenant is not a live tenant. No, this tenant is
This
not a
is
live tenant,
okay.
and there is no connection to any other tenant for this
Mm-hmm.
tenant. Okay. But if you're having a live tenant like sandbox implementation, sandbox preview, and your production, all these four are connected actually. All these four are connected.
Okay.
Whenever you're getting your implementation tenant refresh, you need to specify from which source that you need to get refreshed. Okay. But your sandbox tenant is connected to your production tenant. Every week when it will get refreshed, all the production data will get wiped off. All the production data will get copied to sandbox. That's the general behavior. But this is a
Okay.
GMS tenant actually. This is a GMS tenant which
Okay.
is not connected to any live environment. So there won't be any
Okay.
kind of refresh happening for this one.
Mm-hmm.
In case if you need this, you need to place a kind of specific request. We have a GMS tenant, okay? We have a GMS tenant and we need to have that refresh. But Workday will not do
Mm-hmm.
any kind of data refresh. If there is any kind of patchworks, functionality patches that they need to do, functionality is not
Mm-hmm.
working. In new version, the functionality is working. Such kind of patchworks Workday can do, but cannot copy your production data to GMS tenant because GMS tenant is a demo tenant actually. You'll not have any live data. You'll just have sample data that
Dummy.
Workday offers in this demo tenant.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Your live data
One, one,
cannot be
one,
copied to this.
one question, right?
Yeah.
Let's
Yeah.
we are working on real time live data, right? So whatever the changes you already had in that tenant, you will go away or like no, it refresh it, right? Let's say somebody refreshes production data to sandbox data. Not
Oh,
I'm talking about the GMS. So some changes happened
yeah.
and then
Definitely that will get
when
replaced. Definitely that will get wiped off. Okay. If I'm working on any of
wipe
the
off.
existing testing that I'm doing in Sandbox, right? During weekend when
Mm-hmm.
they get refreshed from production, all the data that I was working this week will get wiped off actually. I'll be getting all the data that is sitting in production to Sandbox.
So with that scenario, what exactly how the process will like somebody is working on they have to finish it or like now again what are the process in general
There are
those kind
some
of
process
scenarios?
actually. There is a process
Okay.
that you need to consider when you're going for Sandbox actually. Sandbox, you know that Sandbox will be for only 1 week, and after 1 week, your
Mm,
production data will get copied as part of weekly
mm,
refresh. You are knowing that. Okay. When you know this
mm,
one, your plan of testing should be within that period actually. Okay.
mm,
You're you're making any kind of testing, right? So that testing should
mm,
happen within that period. So once Friday you're getting your tenant is getting refreshed. So by Thursday you need to complete your testing and plan for deployment to production. But if a testing is
mm,
taking time, okay, if you're taking more than expected, it is taking time, you have two options. One is reach out to Workday,
mm,
reach out to Workday
mm,
through case saying that we don't have our
mm.
sandbox to get refreshed this week because we have not
Okay.
completed our
Okay.
testing yet. Please do not refresh our
Okay.
sandbox so that Workday will exempt that sandbox refresh for that week actually. They'll not be refreshing that one. And this request you need to
Mm,
place at least
mm,
24 to 12 hours before Workday so that they can plan for that one. If you are just saying 1 hour
mm,
before or 3 hours before of the refresh time, they might not accommodate the option actually. They need to have some time to manage this exemption, right? At least 24 hours to 12 hours. You need to be little advanced to update them through a request and they can consider that one.
Okay.
You can actually do continuously for 2
Mm.
times. Third time, you cannot do this one. Okay.
Oh,
Today, you have some kind of emergency that you're not able to complete your testing and you
okay.
place the exemption
Mm.
request. And next week also, you have
Mm.
the same kind of option. Okay. You can continuously place another request. But the third time, after next week, you don't have an option. Workday will not accept the third request.
Okay.
You can only do 2 weeks continuously. After that, they cannot do.
Okay, got it. Okay, they will refresh number. Okay.
Yeah.
One,
Automatically, the third week, it will get refreshed.
one other question later. Let's like when they are implementing, to a new basically all brand new to the system. So that time they won't have any refresh, right? It's like a GMS only. So
We'll
let's
have.
say some X.
We'll have. Generally, implementation will happen in an implementation tenant, actually. Okay.
Okay.
Implementation will happen in an implementation tenant that name typically called as a prototype tenant. We call it as. Okay. Generally, all the implementation will happen in a prototype tenant where it can be your existing implementation tenant or you can purchase your implementation tenant for specific duration. Let's say your implementation is planned for 3 months. For the just 3 months, you can purchase a new implementation tenant, which would be copy of your production. Okay. Now, when you're doing some kind of configuration work to that one, okay, configuration work is done. And since implementation tenant will not be getting refreshed, you don't see any harm actually. Only sandbox tenant will get refreshed. Your implementation tenant will not get refreshed actually until you place a request.
Okay.
Until you go and reach out to Workday, we wanted to have our implementation tenant refresh from production. Until you go and place a request with Workday, they will not be refreshing your implementation tenant. That is the reason why for all the huge implementation tenants, the recommended tenant is implementation tenant actually, because that will not be getting refreshed every week.
On demand only. We need to request to refresh.
Yes, on demand only. When you have a kind of requirement that your impl tenant should get refreshed from production, you go and place a request as how you place a sandbox exemption request, right? Similarly, you go and place a request that you wanted to have your implementation tenant refresh so that they can actually do that request. Okay.
No.
For at least 6 months. Okay, minimum 6 months is what Workday recommends that your implementation tenant to get refreshed. Some organizations, right? Because of the kind of data wipe off kind of concerns they have, they'll not refresh their implementation tenants and they keep more than 6 months, 7 months, 8 months kind of things. With that, there will be a kind of performance issues you should be seeing, like how we are seeing in this tenant now, some kind of junk data performance issues, we are seeing slowness, getting refreshed and all. Such kind of performance you might be, in order to avoid that kind of performances, in order to avoid that kind of performance issue, you'll place such kind of a request. Yeah. In that way,
thank you.
You place a request with Workday for at least 6 months is what Workday recommends actually. Okay. At least 6 months, you can have your impl tenant to get refreshed.
Got it.
Okay.
Thank you. Sorry.
Tenant management is separate actually. Okay. So tenant is the same. There is no separate role for tenant management, but anyone who is actually in a lead role or project lead role or a manager role will be managing the tenants actually. They'll be controlling each tenant when tenant has to get refreshed. Okay. What tenant actually should be having on all, they'll be controlling that actually.
That's another role. Okay. Okay.
Not another role, but another responsibility.
Responsibility, basically. Yeah, lead. Yeah. They know when to do, when to not to do.
Yes,
Take decision makers.
Let's say I've seen one of the large customer called Walmart. Okay. Walmart has around 30 implementation tenants actually. Okay. So they have 30 implementation tenants, and to handle 30 implementation tenants, including your sandbox, including your production tenant, including your sandbox tenant, around 30 to 34 tenants are there actually. So in order to maintain these 30 to 34 tenants, a separate responsibility has to be created so that the person who is managing all this tenant, the responsibility should be when each implementation tenant has to get refreshed. Okay. And what is going on in this implementation tenant, and when refresh has to happen. So even refresh has to be taken place for implementation tenants. Okay, whether it has to be from production, whether it has to be from sandbox, whether it has to be from other implementation tenant is what you'll be planning. You'll be coordinating with all the business users. So check with them what all the activities that they're performing. After that, you'll be taking care of the request that you'll be coordinating with Workday and get that request placed actually.
Got it. Got it.
So
So,
similarly, you might be seeing multiple
mm,
tenants coordinating with each
mm,
user who is using the tenant and have a tenant plan. That would be kind of typically comes under tenant management process.
okay. So one other question, last question maybe. Like no, every company will have only one sandbox and one production environment like tenants, or like more than one sandbox and one production.
So you cannot have more than one. Okay. Production, sandbox, and
Okay.
sandbox preview. These three tenants
Mm.
are part of your subscription. When you subscribe for Workday product, right? Workday will give you three
Uh-huh.
tenants. One is production, one is sandbox preview. Okay. So all these three will
Okay.
be interrelated actually. Okay. So all your
Yeah.
production data will get copied to sandbox. Okay. And all your implement sandbox preview tenants during the release time. Okay. Whenever so it is specifically for release testing. Okay. Whenever you have any
Really.
release, your sandbox preview will be
Mm-hmm.
used to test those release features actually. Okay. So your sandbox
Release.
preview and your
Release
sandbox
means. Mm-hmm. Release
release
means
means
like no
Workday will be undergoing.
Okay.
Go ahead, go ahead. I think some lag is there. Yeah, go ahead. What was the question that you're asking?
No. Release means like no, we need to develop, right? Something we change our system, then that is called as a preview, canvas preview, or like no.
No, no, no,
If
no,
we
no.
if we change something, okay, okay,
No, 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 no. That is not the thing actually. The purpose of
okay.
Sandbox Preview tenant is whenever Workday
Mm-hmm.
is going a new release, okay, like how our mobiles get updated with the new features, right? Whenever there is a new
Yes.
feature, our mobile phones will be getting refreshed, right? We'll be getting a kind of update. You have some new features to get updated. Your new features will be updated tonight. Kind of message will be getting from the mobile provider, no? Similarly, Workday also
Right, right.
Similarly, Workday also will have new features actually. Okay. So
Mm-hmm.
every 2 months, every two times in a year, these new features will be
Yeah.
pushed into Workday. Okay. So every month, every
Okay.
year in the month of March, every year in the month of September, these are the 2 months where your Workday will be moving from one release to another release. So we call that as release one and release two. Okay. Release that will happen in the month of March, we'll call it as release one, and release that will happen in the month of September will be called as release two. Okay. So when this release
Okay.
happens, right? When this release happens, Workday
Mm-hmm.
will be pushing all the new features to first to Sandbox Preview tenant. Okay. So all the new features will be first pushed to Sandbox Preview tenant, and we will
Mm-hmm.
be testing. Workday will be giving 1 month of time to analyze those new features actually, to just see whether those new features are impacting your existing configuration or are they good to move to production. Workday will give 1 month of time.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say if March is a kind of month where new releases will be moved to production. In the month of Feb, Workday will be pushing all the new features to sandbox preview. So you will be performing
Mm-hmm.
some kind of testing, do some kind of analysis, prepare a kind of impact analysis to see that all the new features the Workday has provided are not impacting any of the existing setup that you already configured. But if something is actually impacting, right, you can
Mm-hmm.
report that to Workday, and Workday will be investigating that in that 1 month of period and see if there is an issue. They'll hold off that new feature release to production parent, and they
Mm-hmm.
can go with other ones actually. But if there is no issue, there is just a kind of an education issue with the customer, they'll explain the behavior of the new feature and they'll let the new feature move to production on the defined date actually. So preview is a tenant that will specifically use for release testing. Whenever Workday is undergoing any kind of releases, Workday will
Mm-hmm.
automatically push all those new releases to product sandbox preview, and you'll perform testing there and then move that new feature to production.
Okay.
So that is
Got
a
it.
purpose of preview, and your preview, sandbox, and production will be part of your subscription. Whenever you subscribe for Workday product, automatically you will get a preview and sandbox tenant for subscription. But implementation
Okay.
tenant is something that you need to additionally purchase. Will not be part of your subscription. You need to separately purchase that.
Mm-hmm.
So that is the reason
So all
why,
the
yeah,
yeah.
there is a reason why your implementation tenant will be Getting refreshed
Part
only
refresh.
request with the customer request, because customer own the tenant actually, because they have purchased additionally, they will be placing a request in case they wanted to have a refresh from production. But Sandbox is not like that. Sandbox is a Workday provided tenant as part of your subscription. So there is a design and defined process for Sandbox tenant. Every Friday it has to go for refresh, and all the production data should get copied to Sandbox every week actually. So that whenever you're performing testing next week, you should be playing around with the selected and latest data in Workday.
Okay.
Okay. That is the purpose of
Okay.
Sandbox and Sandbox Preview with implementation tenant.
So that means we have only three or four types of tenants. Like one is implementation, sandbox preview, sandbox, and production. So where the development will happen in general, that's implementation tenant, or like some other tenant also
So
available
if
in
it
your
is a
in
brand new
every
development, okay, if it's a brand new
okay.
development, right, that has to happen, that will start with
Mm-hmm.
the tenant only. Okay. That will start
Okay.
with implementation tenant because,
Mm.
so let me get you some additional information. You see my screen, right?
Yes.
Okay. Production, Sandbox, Sandbox Preview, implementation tenant, and then your customer central tenant. Okay. Basically, these are the
Mm.
5 tenants that you typically get. Okay. Among these 5,
Mm.
this is not a default tenant. You need additionally purchase actually. Okay. Additionally purchase. You can purchase any number, because that's just based on
Mm.
your demand and your budget, right? You can purchase 2
Mm.
implementation tenant. You can purchase 1. You can purchase 3. You can purchase 4. Or you cannot. You don't need to purchase.
Mm.
Okay. Even there are a customer who does not have any implementation tenant also. Okay. Because they don't need.
Oh.
They are not working on heavy
Mm.
projects. They don't have a huge demand on projects. So they won't need any
Mm.
additional budget for this one. They can use Sandbox Preview in that space actually, because Sandbox Preview also will not get a refresh every week. Okay, so you can
Okay.
use Sandbox Preview in this space actually to save your budget. Okay, for small customers, I'm
Oh.
saying. Okay, for small customers who are not using implementation, they can actually do. But in case if they get any kind of request to implement any of the thing in Workday, they definitely need to go for implementation, and they need to purchase implementation for specific duration. Okay.
Okay.
Now coming to the type of tenants, right? We have production, sandbox, and sandbox preview, implementation, and customer central tenant. Okay. These 3 are subscription tenants. Okay. And your sandbox
Mm.
tenant will be copy of your production at least for 1 week actually.
Okay.
So that you can call your sandbox as a
Yeah.
pre-production tenant.
Okay.
Pre-production tenant, because before you move to production, you'll move that to sandbox, and there is a reason why it is called as a pre-production tenant or peak back production tenant. Okay. Peak back production
Mm.
tenant. Then coming to sandbox preview, as we discussed, it is dedicatedly used for release testing. Okay.
Mm.
And since
Gotcha.
the purpose of sandbox preview is different, right, to actually do for
Yeah.
release testing, the space allocated for the sandbox preview is a little low. The storing space kind of thing we call it as, right? So that will be
Yeah.
little less
Lower.
than sandbox, than implementation, than production, because this is not designed for
Mm.
heavy implementations. This is designed only
Yeah.
for release testing. Okay. So you cannot perform heavy implementation in this tenant. In case if you
Mm.
perform, the performance will
Mm.
be little low. Okay.
Mm. Okay.
Your performance cannot be same as
Mm.
sandbox,
That's good.
same as
Yeah.
production, same as implementation. Let's say if you're running a report that is returning 1000 or 1 lakh rows of data in sandbox, which is taking 1 minute of time in your sandbox tenant. If you do this, if you do the same in sandbox preview, it might take 2 minutes or 3 minutes because the performance space, the memory space in sandbox preview is not equal to other tenants actually.
Got it.
Okay, so that's sandbox preview, and then implementation. Since at least a customer will have a recurring projects every year. Okay, so like performance review has to happen every year, right? For every employee has to review every year actually, at least every year. So most of the organization will go for 2 years mid-year review, half-yearly review, or annual review kind of things that have. But at least minimum to minimum one review has to happen for every employee, right? Which is annual review.
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
So that can be a recurring project actually. Okay. Performance can be one. Compensation review can happen, right? Your compensation needs to be revised actually. Okay. At least 1 year that has to happen. Okay. So compensation review has to happen. And then your benefits, specifically US employees. Okay. So US employees will be getting benefits from employer right on their first day. They should get their default benefits actually. Okay. So the benefits has to be allocated for every employee right on their first day. And every year they'll be enrolling into new benefit plan or changing the existing benefit plan or add their dependents, add their children. Every year these changes has to happen. So there is a defined period, October to October to
normally 1-2 weeks.
December, there is a period called open enrollment period. So where all the employees of US will be enrolling their dependents or selecting new plans, removing the existing plans, waive the existing plans and subscribe for new plans during that open enrollment period. And this open enrollment also is a project that will happen for 4 to 6 months actually. Okay. So even this is a recurring projects. You have these heavy recurring projects happening every year, at least even for small customer also. So when they wanted to perform any kind of testing, any kind of huge configuration for this one, your preview tenant might not work actually because the capacity of preview tenant is little low, right? Your preview tenant cannot handle. So in that case, at least one implementation tenant is recommended for every customer. So what they can do is they can do these recurring projects and test that one. If there are any changes, they can perform these changes there. So implementation tenant is the first step that you need to step to perform any kind of implementations. Okay, any kind of heavy enhancements, any kind of heavy troubleshootings. Your implementation tenant is a kind of first tenant that will address all these issues.
Okay. One question here.
Yeah, go ahead.
So basically, right? So the job recruitment, let's say we have everything, right? Those where exactly it directly goes to production, or where they are going to implement. Let's say I have to get a job profile or recruitment or those things, right? So any company.
Okay, so that comes under recruiting module actually. Okay, so there is a recruiting module that will be there whenever you, let's say you are a hiring manager. Okay. You are a hiring manager and you have a position called Workday developer. Workday developer position that you are looking for. Okay. So you will be creating a job description, what all the roles and responsibilities that needs to be performed for Workday role. So you'll be creating a job description and will share to recruiter. Okay. Recruiter team will do like they'll reach out to Workday team, and we have a job description for hiring manager from hiring manager, and we need to have a job profile to be created for them. Okay. So they'll be requesting a job profile creation. So what Workday team will do is, since job profile cannot be created as a kind of separate instance, so once job profile is created, they will attach that job profile to the position actually. Okay. So meaning that every supervisor organization will have members, no? They'll have members who will be part of that, and they'll be reporting to the manager who is managing that supervisor organization, right? So there will be a position in the supervisor organization where once employee fills that position, will become member of the supervisor organization. Okay. Now, when you actually get a job description for your requirement, Workday team will be creating a position or recruiting team can create. Okay. Either Workday team or recruiting team. Both only these two teams can take this responsibility. If recruiting team is not aware of this thing, Workday team will be creating a job profile and position actually.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and they'll use this job profile in the position. Without position, your job profile is blank. When you're creating a position, your position should be
Mm-hmm.
attached with the job profile. Okay. So what Workday team will do is they will create position
Mm-hmm.
with Workday developer, attach this position to the job profile actually. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
What job profile will be consisting of is all your job information. Okay. Your basically the definition of job profile is to define your characteristics of a job. So it defines all the characteristics of a job. So you'll be mentioning your level of the job, okay, and description of the job, which talks about roles and responsibilities, okay,
Yeah.
and your compensation of the job, how much compensation that you need to give for this job, okay, and then you'll be giving grade of the job grade, and country or location of the grade, location of the job. All this information you will be making for a job profile actually. So considering all this information, you'll be creating a job profile and you'll attach the job profile to Workday developer position. Now, once you have job profile ready, right, what recruiting team will do is they'll do job posting. Okay. They'll do job posting. In order to do job posting, they need to have a job requisition actually. Okay. Job requisition, which will be holding this information. Okay. Which will be holding job profile information. Okay. So they'll take a job profile and create a job requisition. Once they have a job requisition, they'll do job posting actually. So what is job posting? Posting your job to the job market actually. Either it is a LinkedIn, either it is Naukri, anything. Okay. They'll do your job requisition through job posting, and your job posting will be available for all the job portals actually. And any candidate who applies for that requisition, right? Applies for it, requisition will be treated as an applicant actually. Okay. They will be called as an applicant. Okay. Because they are applying for a job. They will be treated as an applicant. Okay. So once they apply for a job, they'll become an applicant and they'll be your recruiter will be moving this candidate to multiple stages. Okay. So candidate is applied for a job. Now recruiter will be moving that candidate to interview stage. Okay. So once the interview stage is completed and candidate has shortlisted for the interview, and once interview stage is completed, we'll be performing another stage called assessment actually. Okay. Doing any kind of organization policy assessments and all, they'll bring. Once assessment is completed, do a kind of reference check actually. So check employment reference check or background check. Anything. Okay. Anything can happen in this stage. Once the background check is completed, if there is a satisfaction result with the background check or reference check, your recruiter will move the candidate to offer stage actually. Offer stage, where your offer letter can be released for that employee. So once the candidate accepts that offer, that candidate will be moved for ready to hire stage actually. Okay. Ready to hire stage will connect your recruiting system to core HR system. Okay. Connects to HR system. And from here, your hire business process will take that candidate and hire into Workday. Okay. Hire business process will trigger and hire employee into Workday. This is how employee life cycle will happen from recruiting system. Okay. And here these two can happen before also. You know, after your offer stage, if your recruiter think that after offer stage you can perform reference check and background check, this will come after offer stage. Or if before offering, if they wanted to do any kind of reference check or background check, they can do this and then go for offer stage. These two can be here and there actually, but this is the process how you typically see in Workday a recruiting process.
Okay. One question right here. So we have these many steps, right? Where exactly this fall? Everybody that directly this happens on sandbox or like in production? All these steps.
Okay. This is a live transaction, no? This is a live transaction. You apply for a, let's say you see a job, open job for Workday developer role in Amazon. Okay. In LinkedIn, you have seen that there is a open position for Amazon. So what you'll do, you'll apply for that one. So that will direct to Amazon recruiting system actually. So once you apply for a job, that will hit to their Workday system, and their requisition will be having your application actually. So they'll call you, they'll take all your information. If they feel that your qualifications are meeting their expectations, they'll schedule an interview. Okay. Once the interview is completed, they'll move your candidature. If you're through to the interview, they'll move your candidature further actually to reference check or background check. Once that is done, they'll move your stage to offer. Once offer is moved, they'll move to ready to hire, and from there, your Workday system will be hiring you into Workday system. That's how that will happen. Since this is a live transaction, right? That should happen in production only. When you're making this configuration, when you're doing any kind of a recruitment business process configuration, if you wanted to test this one, as how I've explained, right? If this has to be tested, whether all that I've explained are working correctly or not, you need to test this in non-production tenant. So you'll be performing some kind of configuration as the production and do testing actually. If it is working as expected, you can perform live transaction in Workday itself. Okay, production itself you can perform and have transaction process successfully.
Got it. So generally they test it in lower environment or directly production environment itself. They can test it.
No, test we cannot do in production. Okay.
Oh.
If you're making any change in production, right, you cannot directly make the change in production. Okay, you need to make the change in sandbox and ensure that sandbox changes are working fine. Get it reviewed and provide a sign off from business, and then make the similar change in production.
Okay. Sandbox is the one before pre-prod.
Yeah, sandbox is the one that we'll be doing for all the break fixes and small fixes actually. For all the time-taking fixes, okay, if it is taking more than 1 week or 10 days kind of things, you go for implementation tenant.
Got it. Understood. Thanks.
Okay.
Okay.
That's how your recruiting cycle will work. And if you're managing Workday recruiting, will be like this. Okay. So most of the organization, they'll have a recruiting system in a different system and Workday in a different system. Okay. Meaning that they might have Greenhouse as a kind of recruiting system, not Workday recruiting. They might have Greenhouse as a recruiting system because the cost of subscription for Greenhouse is a little low than Workday. Okay. So if they think that let's go with Greenhouse only, they say if they think that all the recruiting process, whatever I've explained right here, all this process still here. Okay. Till this process will happen in Greenhouse system. Okay. Job posting, job acquisition, applications, everything will happen in a Greenhouse system. And then once the candidate is ready to hire, you'll be creating an integration actually. Okay. You'll be creating an integration. That integration will pick this candidate who is in ready to hire stage and process that into Workday. Okay. So that integration will be taking care of getting the candidates from Greenhouse to Workday through integration process.
Integration process. Okay.
Yeah. Your integration will get that candidate from Greenhouse to Workday.
Okay. Understood.
Yeah. So that is a process actually. That is a life cycle of an employee which you need to know. Okay. So all the security content and all, those are all actual content you should be able to get. But these are all foundation concepts which you need to know before you start knowing something about Workday. Okay.
Okay. Got it.
Okay. Now getting into the security, I think we are almost closer to the time. So probably we can start creating the role-based security in our tomorrow session, but we'll try to understand the difference. But at least we'll try to create a role today. Okay.
Okay. Sure.
Let me share my screen. So why we actually came to all these discussions, because we were actually checking the security of maintain as in, because Jacqueline is able to create a role, but why she's not able to create a security group is what our question was. Because maintain as enabled role is assigned to security group, the security administrator, but create security group permissions are removed from security administrator. There's a reason why Jacqueline is not able to create that. When you go for maintain as enabled roles, right, you generally will not see this many roles in real system. Here you see around close to 900 roles actually. 900 roles, that's a huge number, and you'll not be seeing that. You'll not see that. In general, you'll not see that huge number. Okay. You'll hardly see 30 to 40 roles. That's it.
Okay.
Okay. Because we'll not have any dummy roles or any kind of testing roles here. No, here you can see with the same name, there will be a lot of roles actually. People will be creating. I myself, would have created at least 20 roles by now.
Oh, okay.
See this kind of behavior in real tenant, no? So you should not be seeing that huge count actually. Okay. Now, when you create a role, right,
Mm-hmm.
you will be here is what you will be specifying where you wanted to use that role actually. So role-based security is nothing but in constraint, you will be restricting the access based on the organization. No, that's why your access will be limited based on the organization. You can limit your security based on the organization. That's what your constrained access means, right? Now
Yes.
I'm creating one role here, people partner. Okay, if I have people partner, I can enable this for.
Company.
I can enable this for any organization, wherever you wanted to use. Okay, you wanted to use at company level, filter, or level. You first define there in the role actually.
Hmm.
List
Later also
actually.
we can append other roles also. Let's say we created company later for this role we can assign others also we
No,
can.
no, you cannot assign to. When I say that
No,
you
no,
need,
enable, not assign. Like let's say we people created, we just added only company. Can we edit again? We need to add
yeah, you
company
can. Let's say
hierarchy.
now you have enabled for only company. Now later
Hmm.
on, after 1 week, you think that the same role should be restricted for even cost center also. You can come here and add cost center.
Okay.
So company hierarchy, cost center, cost center hierarchy. So like this, you can add location hierarchy also. You can add. Okay. Because these are all the organization entities, right? You can also add
Yeah.
at supervisory
But
organization also. Okay. For supervisory organization also, you can add. Supervisor is nothing but supervisory organization. Okay.
okay.
Okay, so we will enable this role first to all these organization levels so that when we create a role-based security group, when we attach this role to that role-based security group, that role-based security group can be used at these organization level. If you have not added company and then you wanted to use at company level, you cannot use that because you have not enabled at company level. No, you cannot use your role at company. Okay, so that's the reason whenever you're making a role, you need to have a clarity. What is the requirement? Okay, why we are creating this role where the access has to be restricted at company level or at location level or at organization level, wherever you wanted to have, you can actually enable all those things and use it from there.
What workday role does here? Like above the left one before. Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
one? Workday role.
The, yeah.
So this you don't need to give anything. Okay.
Okay.
So this can be blank.
Okay.
This can be something like, if there are any kind of specific roles for your organization that you have created, right? Those can come here, but you don't need a specific workday role here. Okay. All you need is your role that you have created and
Okay.
needs to be
Hmm.
enabled for your organization. Okay. So if anything specific to the role that you have already created, right? So that also should
Hmm.
be mapped to this one and both should be enabled for this one that you can do. But you'll not be getting that kind of requirement or that kind of possibilities when you're managing rules.
Hmm.
Okay. And then here I told you, right, for every security thing that you need to have it administered by security administrator.
Hmm.
Welcome. So with that, you have all the required inputs for your role. You have added and then click on OK. Your role will get created. And then when you create a role-based security group, you'll be taking this role to
Mhm.
role-based security group and manage.
So those like the show inherited as
Yeah, wherever you've added the organization, right?
yeah.
That will be defaulted to that organization now. And based on you assign to any specific person, that will be getting inherited actually to a supervisor organization called the Workday HR. So from there, if you create any subordinate organization, for this people partner will get inherited to all the subordinate organizations.
This is self-explanatory, like restricted to assign self-assigned role, BPs, restricted single assignment.
You can assign it anywhere. Okay. Once you have role-based security assigned with this role, you can go ahead and assign that role-based security group BPs anywhere that you wanted to control your BPs. You can go and do that. You can do anywhere. Okay. Once you have a role-based security created with this role and assign permissions, you can use that anywhere.